Hi again. We're continuing our week on grace. In the book of Exodus, God frees his people. He also reveals a great deal about himself in doing that. For those involved who have missed it because they were too focused on the narrative or what it all means for them, God puts it this way. God says, hey, pay attention. In verse 6 here it says, "And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation." In this bit of Exodus, God is identifying as compassionate and gracious and also fair. The idea that God is all-powerful, that he's the creator, that he's the judge, is only tolerable to us because we believe he is also gracious, loving, and fair, not some kind of tyrant. Christians don't worry where they stand before God. They are loved by him, not because they're so lovable, but because God's nature is so loving. We've all met people who make us feel loved. We've all met people who seem to go about life loving on all kinds of people, accepting them as they are, not pushing them in any way, offering gifts and kindnesses. I hope you have someone like that in your life. And if you do, that person is a symbol, a mirror, a reflection of the great gift we have in God, the actual love of God that is more abounding than any love that we find here on earth. In the story of Exodus, we read in verse 8, Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. That is the appropriate and instinctive reaction of the realization by anyone about who God is. When you realize that God is so loving, that God is so forgiving, and also so powerful and just, you worship. Now, some of us aren't there yet. Some of us aren't worshipers. Some of us are atheists or agnostic or whatever. And some of us might have recently realized that they've been in the faith for a long time and they haven't spent too much time thinking about it lately. Either way, I want to leave you with just a very simple question. How did Moses know to worship that day? I mean, in the story, he just instinctively, he bows down and he says, I'm going to worship. But what did worship look like? One of the great graces we have is that our worship can look any number of ways. And it sure does, doesn't it? Now, we all know there's been these worship wars and battles about how to worship and what have you, but at the root of it, we are free to worship God as we see fit. I don't know how Moses worshiped God that day, and yet Moses worshiped God and worshiped him well. I wonder how you might worship God this day. What would that look like? What form could it take? I know there's no church to go to, so what does worship look like today?